This is the best interview I ever had, and I'm Marc Raco. Thanks for listening. I've been sharing a few special moments from some of the amazing interviews I've been privileged to have over the last 10 years. Here's one of them. She's known as the Good Kardashian. To know Angie Kardashian is to love her, to appreciate her, and to admire her. And frankly, she's earned it. She was in the very wing of the Pentagon that was destroyed in 9/11 just a month earlier, being honored for her community support of the Marine Corps. And she was in the Twin Towers days afterwards. And then, the 9/11 tragedy. Angie was so determined to do something to help. She sold her successful restaurant of 22 years, flew across the country to New York City, and spent the next 2 years cooking meals, feeding, and entertaining thousands of firefighters in over 100 New York firehouses, almost entirely at her own expense. And when she did run out of money, she went, got a job so she could be there for those first responders. When she finally went home, she became a flight attendant, one of the most popular in JetBlue's fleet, with more than 10,000 personal contacts. That is her magnetic quality. And after all of that selflessness and sacrifices of career and fortune, her one goal, if money was no object, well, it probably will surprise you. Her commitment to helping others brought her to tears, and her extraordinary story might just bring you there too. All right, Angie, 9/11 rolls around. What a tough day. You were in California, and then you found yourself in New York. How did that happen?
When President Clinton closed the Marine bases, the Commandant of the Marine Corps gave me a medal, and it's called the Meritorious Public Service Medal. It's the highest medal that you can get as a civilian. And so 34 days before 9/11, I was in the Pentagon in the Marine Navy wing where the plane went in. I left there and I decided, since I'm on the East Coast, I might as well go to New York for vacation. Went to New York, went into the observation deck at the World Trade Center Tower. I have the ticket framed here in my home. And I had never gone up there before, and I decided this time I would. I paid the $15 or whatever it was and took pictures and went up in that tower. Left that tower, went into the other tower, and had lunch. So 30 some odd days before 9/11, I was in all three of those buildings. So when 9/11 happened, I felt like it could have been any one of those days. It could have been the day I was in the Pentagon. It could have been the day that I was in either one of the two towers. And it just felt very, very, very close to home. And so I had an epiphany, and I decided that I was going to sell my restaurant after 22 years to go to New York and cook for firemen. So I put the restaurant up for sale, and I sold it in 6 weeks. And that right there told me that I had made the right decision, because it was a very difficult decision to sell my restaurant. It was really my life, my baby. Yeah, I never got married, never had kids, and 22 years of my life was pretty much that restaurant. And I was really, really involved in the community. And it was a tough decision, but I sold it in 6 weeks. And then on Thanksgiving Day, a day in my life when I had cooked for Marines for 22 years, I decided to fly to New York. It was Thanksgiving Day 2001, right after 9/11. I decided to fly to New York. I have a cousin that lived in the Upper West Side, and I went and slept at her house, and I said to her, okay, where's the closest firehouse? And she told me it was on 100th Street. And so I went there, I took my menu, my business card, and I had our police chief, our fire chief, a couple of lawyers from our community, and a couple of the colonels and a couple of the generals at this point, because I had gotten to know a few of them too, write letters in my behalf saying that I wasn't crazy and that I'm not some crazy woman that coming into your firehouse, but I wanted them to know that I wasn't there to try to come and bomb them or whatever And so I knocked on the first door and I said, my name is Angie. I want to come cook for you. Here's letters telling you a little bit about my background, and I'd like to come cook for you guys. And so they were very sweet and said, yes, okay. And then I said, okay, where should I go next? And that happened 5 times. And I got 5 firehouses and 5 names and spoke to 5 firehouses and did that same routine and told all of them that I had to come back to California, close my restaurant, or, close the escrow in my restaurant, and that I would be back in a few months to cook for them. Because I needed to do that first, because I wasn't really sure when I got to California if they would even let me go into the firehouses and cook, because I cooked right in the firehouses, not at ground zero. And I wasn't sure they would let me do that. So I went first on Thanksgiving and got that all squared away, and then came back to California and closed the escrow on my restaurant and went back several months later.
Gosh, that's extraordinary. Why did they let you do this? You were cooking for thousands of firefighters, 103 firehouses. How did you fund that?
Well, you probably know that the firehouses, usually they cook their own food. Usually there's a couple of guys that go out, and all the guys throw money on the table, $5, $10, whatever it is. And then they've got a couple of guys that are in charge, and they go into the grocery stores and they buy their food, bring it back and cook it. And all the guys pitch in. The ones that know how to cook do the main cooking, and the other ones kind of pitch in and chop onions or do whatever. And so me coming in there, of course, I'm a chef and had a restaurant for 22 years. So it was a night off for them. It was where they didn't have to think about what are we cooking tonight. They didn't have to buy anything. They didn't have to throw that money on the table. It was just a night off. Just all you have to do is walk into the room, sit down on the table, everything will be ready for you. And that's how I presented it. And they all said yes. So it was just a special night for them. And I brought tablecloths and candles and made it real special, and nice salt and pepper shakers, crystal, and made everything really nice. So it was just a different way of eating for them, just for one night.
You were such an important piece of this moment in history, and most people, they don't know about this. You cooked for thousands of firefighters, over 100 firehouses. You brought light during that time, yeah? Right.
And I matter of fact, as you say that, I'm in my room, I'm in my office in my home right now, and I have cathedral ceilings in this particular room, and one side of the wall is all my Marine Corps medal. Every time I did something for the Marine Corps, they would give me something. They gave me a K-bar, and it says, Angie, you're a cut above. And the medal is framed with a flag that they flew over the Marine base. It's a shadow box, and that's hanging on the wall, and several other pieces of memorabilia. They put me up in the Goodyear blimp a couple of times, because the blimp hangars are on the Tustin Marine Base, and every time it would come there for repair, they would call me and say, come on, Angie, let's go for a ride. So I got pictures of me in the blimp. So lots of things on one wall. The other wall is my fireman wall. It's painted red, and it's got all of my memorabilia from the fire department. But because you said what you just said, I got an official thank you letter from the fire department, and I'll just read part of it. It says, thank you for your generosity, dedication, hard work, and thoughtfulness. The music, candles, tablecloth lent to the ambiance, and your spirit and kindness to a very pleasant atmosphere. Please extend our thanks to the members of your church and the wonderful CDs. My church, which is Saddleback Rick Warren, Saddleback Church, donated hundreds, probably thousands of CDs. It was called One Nation Under God CDs, and I gave one to every fireman that I cooked for. But anyway, for the wonderful CDs and for prayers, which helped sustain us during some very trying times. Also, please thank your friend's daughter for patriotic towel. There's a patriotic towel that she bought and monogrammed it with my name on it, and I gave one to every firehouse that I cooked for. So that was my official thank you letter from the fire department, but also the Honor Legion of the Fire Department in New York sent me a letter. It says, "Thank you for the great dinner the other night, especially the fun we all had singing together. I haven't seen the men enjoy themselves at the dinner table like that for a long time. We surely appreciated it." So that meant so much to me, that, all the fun we had singing together, because they were in such a dark period, and just being able to, get them to smile and maybe laugh a little bit and have a little bit of fun during that dark time, just meant the world to me.
I imagine it was very special in a very dark time for them, right?
One thing I should mention, in my restaurant, I used to do a little singing and dancing comedy thing, and I would make people sing Amore and Mac the Knife, and we'd get up and do the hokey pokey and stuff like that. Well, I have a CD with a bunch of different songs on it, and I would bring that CD with me, and I would play it as background music while I was cooking. And I had the words printed out to Amore, which I used to pass out in my restaurant. And so when I was cooking that night for the guys, I would pass out those song sheets. And before I let them eat the food, I would tell them, "Okay, I cooked for you. Now you have to sing for me." And so they would all grab the song sheets and they would sing. And I have video of probably, 20 of the Firehouses that you would be cracking up to see these big burly guys, standing up and singing, "When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's the Lord." And they're all singing it. And it's just a riot. And it just made my heart smile to see them enjoying themselves.
But at some point you did stop. So how did you know it was time to stop, to move on?
When I ran out of money.
Oh my.
Well, I used the profits from the sale of my restaurant, and then I refinanced my house twice. I was fortunate enough to buy a fairly nice house in California, but when the market was way down, and then the market went way up, and so I had a lot of equity in my house. So I was able to pull out in the 7 figures. And to add to that, I also had some of my friends here in California donated. I probably had about $15,000 in donations from my friends, $100 here, $100 there. So I did have about $15,000, but I would say altogether that project probably cost me probably a couple $100,000 to do it.
Oh my gosh, just extraordinary. So after all of this, what in the world was next?
Well, next was to come back to my house. And by the way, when I moved to New York temporarily, I had some people from my church move into my house to help me with my house payment here, because I didn't have a job, so I didn't have an income coming in. So I had some people renting my house for me. So when I came back, I came back into my house and again, didn't have a job. So I started my job search and needed to. Actually, I worked at the Olive Garden in Times Square. I worked there for about 6 months towards the end of my 2 years of being in New York, just to make money so that I could continue doing what I call my cooking ministry. I worked at the Olive Garden for about 8 months to get some more money to do what I did. Because let's face it, living in New York is not cheap. And so, and initially when I first was coming to New York, someone had told me to live at the YWCA was about $35 a night. And I thought, well, that's great. I can do that, $35 a night, blah, blah, blah. Well, when I got there, I found out that it was $75 a night. So for $75 a night, I figured I could just rent an apartment, rather than stay at the Y. I can get some kind of a little studio or something. So that's what I ended up doing. And I moved 13 times in 2 years, moving around because I was picking up sublets from different people. And, then that person would come back and I'd have to go someplace else. And then they would come back. And a couple of times I lived for about 3 or 4 months in one place, but I moved 13 times. Anyway, and then I worked at the Olive Garden, and it just I just needed to get home. I'd been gone from here for 2 years, and needed to get back to my house and try to, because I had my restaurant for 22 years and now here I am. I have no job. I have no income, nothing coming in. I've refinanced my house a couple of times, used part of one of my annuities, spent all my money from selling my restaurant. So I needed to come back and start a life. So that was my goal. That's what I did. May of 2004, I came back to California and started looking for a job.
How did you end up becoming a flight attendant?
Well, I still get invited to military events. And I was invited to a military event and walked in, saw this fellow that I knew that was in the Marine Corps. And, hi, how are you? And his name is Scott Ferrando. He's a very good friend of mine. And I said, hey, what are you doing now? And he said, well, I'm retired from the Marine Corps. And he said, I'm a pilot for JetBlue. I said, really? And he looked at me and he pointed his finger in my face and he said, Angie, you should do this. You'd be really good at it. And I said, yeah, whatever. And about a week later, I ran into a girlfriend who's a flight attendant for American. And she looked at me and she said, Angie, you would be such a good flight attendant. And she pointed her finger in my face, just like Scott did. And she said, and JetBlue is hiring. So I felt that was a sign from heaven. And I went on the internet that night and I applied online and they called me and hired me in 3 days. And that's how I became a flight attendant. And then I make friends on the airplanes and I keep relationships going. And I have 10,000 people in my personal database.
Boy, that really says something. I mean, that's 10,000 people you're going to see in heaven, no doubt. You help a lot of people. What's satisfying to you? What brings happiness to you, Angie?
Oh, satisfying to me is having this interview with you. Satisfying to me is still being friends with so many of the firemen that I met. And one of the reasons why I went to New York, to me, it was a Christian thing for me to do. And to all the guys that I spoke about the word and God and got some guys to be believers and guys that wrote me notes that said, you've changed my life. The Marines, I mean, I still to this day have Marines that call me and tell me what a difference I made in their life and telling me that on Thanksgiving Day, if they didn't come into my restaurant.
Oh, it's okay, Angie.
Sorry.
I mean, this means a lot to you.
If they didn't come to my restaurant and eat, that they wouldn't have had a meal that day. So that's where I get my fuel for my life, from all of the people around me and all the people that I'm able to help and nurture and befriend and just keep in contact with.
One thing I've noticed about you, Angie, is you really try to keep memories and stories alive. How are you doing that? I mean, how are you making sure the memories are remembered? Right.
Well, one of, I actually have a PowerPoint presentation that I do, and I travel all over the United States and tell my story. And yes, it is a 9/11 story, but it's also a story about my life, trying to get people to pay it forward. And my final slide in my PowerPoint presentation says that I promised the firemen that I would never let people forget what happened on 9/11, and that is a goal in my life today. And so I printed up a flyer and pamphlet that I give out. Even on the airplanes, you start talking to people and they ask, "Oh, what did you do before this?" And so you get in the conversation. But I pass out my flyer and I get as many people as I can to call me to go and speak to women's groups, men's groups, Rotaries, huge corporations, whatever. It's sort of a motivational speech to, for people to give back to the world. And I'm not asking people to, give up their business and sell their business and go to New York 3,000 miles away and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's not what I'm saying. But I just say to them, help somebody in your church, hold the door open for somebody in the grocery store. Somebody drops something, help them pick it up. But you see a lady, screaming at her child in the grocery store, and you realize she's having a tough day. Walk over and just put your hand on her and try to calm her down and help her with her child for a minute. Just little, if everybody did one little thing every day to somebody else that they don't know or even they do know, this world would be such a better place. It would be such a better place. And the more I do things, the more I see things around me that other people are doing. So it's working. People don't want to hear about 9/11 anymore. They don't want to hear that stuff.
I don't think your story is about 9/11 anymore. It's about being selfless, doing something for the good of many.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but sometimes I just feel like not everybody agrees with that, But when I start my presentation out, that's always what I say. That, yes, this is a story about 9/11, but it's more of a story about me and my life and what I gave up to go give back.
Angie, do you have any long-term goals you want to accomplish? Something tangible or specific?
Actually, one of my dreams was to get a motorhome, a big motorhome, and take all my stuff, and maybe not all, but most of my stuff in my room, and make like a little traveling museum and drive around the United States and go to some of the smaller towns, some of the states where people don't really know what happened. People don't really know all the little stories that I know about the fireman who was walking into a building and a chief called him back and he came back and the chief walked in and they found the chief decapitated in a running position and saved that guy's life because that would have been him. They don't know all those stories, and I have hundreds of those that I tell, when I'm doing my presentation. So I've always wanted to kind of take the show on the road, so to speak. But that and being a flight attendant, it'd be pretty easy for me to do that because I could drive the motorhome somewhere, do a couple of presentations, fly home, do my work, whatever I had to do, and then go back to the motorhome and continue on. But again, that's financially, I could never afford to do that. But
all you need is one person to listen, to pay it forward, and a person to say, "I'll help you, Angie, to make it happen." Someone like you, just one.
That's true. That's very, very true.
I'll be back soon with another memorable interview moment. Please be sure and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you find your best podcasts. Don't miss a moment. And you can follow the show on Instagram and Facebook at Best Interview Pod and Twitter or X at Listen Subscribe. Thank you for joining me and see you soon.